Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, here with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. What is up, everybody? I'm just excited to be here for another episode, like always. But enough about us, man. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, Hannah Judson, to the show. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Yeah, Hannah, it's an honor to have you on the show today. But before we get into everything, we think it's kind of important for you to just kind of introduce yourself and tell us and our audience about what you do.
Yeah, well, my name is Hannah Judson, and I'm an American. I am also French, and I live in France. I'm here in the afternoon, my afternoon, your morning, and I'm a singer-songwriter and an artist, and I also have had various businesses on the side, more related to e-learning and ed tech companies. And it's interesting that we were in touch, and I'm really happy to be on that entrepreneurial life, because no matter what my projects are, I have always found that I'm just sort of by nature entrepreneurial. Like, I think a lot of artists are, whether they know it or not, entrepreneurial. And I think I learned a lot of my entrepreneurial skills working through creative projects. But then at the same time, I've worked, in business and worked in marketing and advertising, and then having my own businesses. And so I've had these sort of different engines going professionally.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I mean, I'm glad we connected as well, and I'm glad you're actually on the show. But with everything you just said, Hannah, what inspired you to become a musician, and where did your journey with that begin? And ultimately, how did you actually end up in Paris?
Yeah, so many good questions.
Yeah.
Where do I begin? See, the thing about music is that music is just part of the DNA of my family. And so I played instruments when I was very young. My father was very musical. He was a scientist, but his hobby was music. And so we had musical conversations with him. His best friend was a composer, a new music composer. So I was around musicians and artists and people like that at a very young age. And I was encouraged to experiment, not just to take lessons, but to experiment. And I remember very early on, I wrote something. I think it was we had various instruments around the house, and I wrote something we had this pedal organ that was my father picked up somewhere, and I wrote something up, and I wrote up the notes. I had done this piece, and I remember my father showing his friend, the composer, "This is what my daughter just did." And so I was very much encouraged to mess around in a way that was maybe a little bit unique. I mean, I think that a lot of like serious parents ask for serious musicianship from their children, and sometimes that wasn't me. And I mean, I took my lessons and learned the theory as far as I could, but I am much happier when I'm making things. So in any instrument I learned, I always wanted to get to the point where, okay, can we get this like classical music out of the way and we can start writing our own stuff? Yeah. That's where I put it. But to tell you the truth, I always wanted a guitar, and I never played the guitar. And it wasn't until I graduated from college, I moved to Portland, Maine, and I had my first week after college. I had a temp job working for an insurance company. I got my first paycheck. I paid the rent, the leftover money. I went to the guitar store, Buck Dancer's Choice, still there in Portland, Maine, and I bought my first acoustic guitar and a Bob Dylan songbook. And I went home and I figured out some songs. And then I was like, no, I really want to write my own songs. So I just took the chords I was learning and then started writing my own songs. And I've been writing songs always since that point. But the journey was long. I mean, I've been around for a while. And so after the Portland, Maine stint, I moved to Vienna for a while, and I traveled around, and then I moved to Boston then I moved to Spain. where I studied Spanish classical guitar, and I continued to write my songs. So I was writing pretty quirky songs, pop format, rock format, but with classical picking. And then when I moved to Chicago, I was like, I need an electric guitar. That's what I want now. And so I went with a friend to a pawn shop, and I had a little bit of money in my pocket, and I bought it was a Fender knockoff. It was a red guitar that actually was a really good guitar, but it was definitely a knockoff. It had a really nice sound, and I bought a tiny little Fender amp, and I plugged in a cord, and then plugged it in, and from then on, I've been playing the electric guitar. I have acoustic guitars that I do return to, but I formed a band without really knowing how a band is formed. And I started booking gigs without knowing how to book gigs. And I started doing, advertising and marketing without really knowing how to do it, but just sort of instinctually knowing this is what we have to do. And so all of that was in the 90s in Chicago. And it was in a period of time, and I'm like not kidding, there were not a ton of women in the music scene in Chicago. I mean, there certainly were some key people that did great things, but there were many, many evenings when I was there, like the only woman on the lineup, that's changed. Like it's a different world.
Sure. Yeah.
It was one of my first sort of responses to that was I started designing these or curating these shows. I called them, I don't remember what they were called, like not Riot Girl, like these shows that were curated with bands, mainly with women. And I hosted them at not the Bop Shop. Now I can't even remember the name of the club. It was a really good club in Chicago. It was a while ago. That club is, I think, no longer there. But so I would host those, and those really got some traction. And so that always kind of interested me, like curating shows in a way, to sort of promote my own cause.
Yeah.
Really.
It's kind of appeal to a certain audience. And I mean, yeah, what you said about all that is great, because there's so much that I think an entrepreneur can identify with in that. First of all, in the wanting the drive to create, so it sounds like you had that always, like you didn't, and you were encouraged to do that from your parents too. So, there was that creative element of your music where you didn't just want to play it, and you didn't just want to be this, classical musician type person. You wanted to really build something, make something your own.
Yeah.
That's what every entrepreneur is like. Okay, I could go do something that somebody else is doing, but I'd rather just build something of my own and do it myself. So I think that's really cool. And then when you started when you were in Chicago and you were gathering other musicians and curating shows and doing the marketing and all that stuff, you're really starting a business without, maybe even really realizing that you were starting a business.
Exactly.
Very cool.
I think that there are people who are just innately entrepreneurial, that just are that way, sort of like, I see that person doing that. How do I do that? How do I get myself over there? And then there are other people who fall into entrepreneurship out of circumstance and I think that we're going to see a lot of that right now. Like a lot of people are losing their jobs right now, and it stinks. And, but I think that really one nice thing about America is there is in our culture a culture of resilience and getting back up. And I think that not everyone's going to innately want to open their own business or start their own thing, but they're going to have to.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a huge thing to not give up too, right? I mean, one thing is when you get hit, whether it's you losing your job, a lot of people, like you mentioned, and I think us as entrepreneurs, like I lost 90% of my, work right off the bat when everything hit, and so it was one of those things, like, how do you adjust from that? You got to learn how to adjust fire and like just don't give up, right? You lose your job. And right now I think is a perfect opportunity to start, especially if you have somebody to help you out in a way, or have anybody that's encouraged you in the past to start something. I mean, you got to let your creative process flow. And I think as a musician, creativity is like where it's all at, right? Entrepreneurs, we're creative individuals. And I mean, again, I think musicians are in their own right entrepreneurs, because how creative they are and how they have to they live the nomadic lifestyle and bounce around like you said, right? Like you've been doing. You're in Paris now or in France. And I mean, it's awesome to see that. And entrepreneurs, we're all about trying to live that nomadic lifestyle to where we're traveling around, and, you know, we could work from a keyboard and be a keyboard warrior and all that stuff. And it's fun. I mean, and again, we're presented with different challenges, our upbringing, and just hearing what you said is just one of those things why we have individuals like you on the show, because not everybody's journey is the same. And it's one of those things that everybody's different. And then it's funny how you're like, you know, I'm a musician, and then how you fell into entrepreneurship. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you said a bunch of things now. I just wanted to like riff on all of them, except now I've forgotten all my thoughts completely. But just that we are all different. We do have our different ways into. Oh, you were saying about like being keyboard warrior. So the internet, I don't know when it started, like in the 80s actually, but when it started becoming out, you know, when I first became aware of it, it was like mid 90s. And for me, that was total game changer, where I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't just email. This is going to be huge. Mm-hmm. And I love the internet. I mean, there's all sorts of dangerous areas in it, and bad things happen. But I love how it's allowed us to just sort of open up into communities, and, you know, and it's like an augmentation of relationships, and from doing silly things like you can do your banking online now. And I certainly wouldn't be living in France if that didn't all happen. And that's where, at one point I was teaching. I had been working in advertising, and then I started doing adjunct teaching in colleges in Chicago, and I really enjoyed teaching. I was teaching graphic design and different things. And I was in a classroom thinking, you know, I like teaching, but I definitely don't want to do this my whole life. But I was like, what could I do? And I was like, just sort of kind of brainstorming session in my head. And I heard right at that time about distance education. It wasn't even called e-learning then, distance education. And I thought, distance education, that's for me. You know, I didn't even have a laptop then, but I knew that laptops existed. But I was like, I could imagine myself with a laptop on a beach somewhere doing a little bit of the activities needed to make money, and then I would go do something else. But that's how the whole thing started for me, this idea of like a remote work, nomadic life, or at least emotionally nomadic, even though because I haven't been moving around a lot lately, but the ability to move around is really, for some of us, super important to not get locked in.
Yeah, for sure.
And you mentioned like the emotional side of it. I think that's important too. Even if you don't move around, just, you know, even if you aren't moving around all the time, just having that, you know, freedom that you can, that's huge. You know, if you feel like, oh man, I'm locked into this job that's here, that, you know, I got this mortgage and all, you know, all these things make you feel like you're not able to move around, even if you wanted to. And that can be tough. So just having that, you know, the freedom of like, hey, I could pick up and do this wherever. You know, we could, even if you just go on vacation for a couple of weeks and you can work while you're on vacation. I mean, that's so powerful. So yeah. And for you to have the foresight of that, you know, in the mid 90s, and just really, you know, really identify like, yeah, cause I don't think a lot of people were probably grasping the full potential, but that's obvious. That was obviously is a huge part of it, because now so many people can find something that they're passionate about, or that they want to share with the world, and they can monetize that in a certain way. So yeah, I think that's very cool.
An interesting thing to come out of the whole recent pandemic lockdown situation. I mean, so obviously just a lot has happened, and some of it's good and some of it's bad, but even good and bad isn't really the interesting thing. The interesting thing is what the result is going to be out of all of this. But one thing is that a lot of companies have sort of just moved over to remote employees, which they should have done, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah, why not?
We're not going to come back because it's better. So many things can be done remote. But people are just locked into like, no, we need to face-to-face meetings and flying everywhere. And it's like,
well, what's a killer with that though is like I really would be down for that all around, just for the fact that a lot of people's commutes are crazy, ridiculous, and and you're spending most of your day sitting in traffic.
Oh yeah,
So
it's
bad.
insane.
I mean, you know, my wife, she wakes up at like 5 o'clock every morning and she's on the road like at 5:30, 6 o'clock getting to work just because, I mean, with 2 kids and all that stuff, just because, so she can just get out of that traffic. Because if she waits to when everybody else is going to work, she's going to be sitting there for hours, and it's
Yeah,
just,
it just
it's
doubles
ridiculous.
her time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. I used to work with people who would commute an hour and a half each way, up to
Crazy.
2 hours.
Yeah.
I was in New Jersey, and people were commuting from like Manhattan, which is
4 hours a
insane.
day, dude. Like,
It's yeah, it's out of control, and it just like for some people, it's just what you have to do, or what they what is the most obvious thing to do, and it's just like, all right, I've got this job and I have to commute that far, and and I think maybe 10, 20 years ago there were so fewer opportunities to work remotely and to really have a job that was maybe closer to you, so you really had to do that kind of thing. But now it's just there's obviously some jobs you have to be present at, you have to go to, but for the things you don't have to, it doesn't make any sense not to just work remotely. So yeah.
And corporations are becoming more comfortable with it, and people are learning how to put their backgrounds up. Like I'm in my basement studio and I don't have a background, but I actually do the screen that I can put up.
Yeah, Clint's got it.
So yeah, I think we are definitely entering a new era.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, so we want to touch a little bit later about the businesses that you've started. But right now, I think it's interesting. You're a traveling musician, and you also have a full-time job as a digital product developer. How do you balance those two things? They seem, they're so different in nature. How do you balance them?
So my life has not, it just isn't balanced. I work a lot, and I'm okay with that. So at some point, I kind of wonder if I ever let up on the accelerator, if it's all just going to come crashing down. But I work hard and I work a lot, and I don't take weekends off. I take weekends off from my day job. But so for years, so the job that I have right now is I work for an American company that's part of a global company. We're global. I'm based out of the Paris office, but the team is remote. And it really dovetails with the rest of my life. And previous to this job, I was for years working for myself, doing similar work. But I ended up finding this job. They hired me, and it works for me. I wouldn't have just taken any job. With this job, I can still go to the United States in the summer, or I can move around. Just as long, I'm on a remote team. It's a global company, and their thinking is very global. So I think that, that I think a lot of companies are going to become like this company, because it's good to have global teams there. I mean, you need global teams.
Yeah.
And global teams are people who do work at home, and just it doesn't matter where you are when you're logging in. It matters that you are part of the group and getting things done.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty progressive for a relatively large corporation, I guess. A global corporation. They kind of get it, and they understand that I bet they're getting more productivity out of people than other large businesses who still feel the need to kind of have everything, have everybody in an office, and it just is clunkier that way. And I think you can probably, as a business of any size, if you are remote, you do have remote teams, you can scale up and down a lot easier, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a clunkiness to remote teams also. I mean, there are pros and cons, but I'm definitely not one of those people that, no, you have to be face to face too. You really know what it's about. I think that you can really know who you're working with remotely, and because you talk to them a lot, and you end up sharing things, and it's not so dissimilar. When people are in an office, they've got an office facade, and that facade breaks down. And, people.
Yeah,
but,
the work-life thing is a little disconnected. So I think that's cool that you have the opportunity to kind of your musical career isn't perfectly in line with your, your day job. They don't perfectly dovetail, but at the same time, the freedom of the freedom of your day job allows you to have a much better work-life balance, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that was always my goal. I mean, I had to work, and that, there was no way around that. So I designed the way I work to allow for the things that I also wanted to accomplish in my life.
Yeah, that's great. So Hannah, I mean, so with product development, you talk about an entrepreneurial approach, right? With technology to design solutions for clients. So can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. Maybe I should start at the beginning and work up to where I'm.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah.
I was working. I told you I was in higher education, teaching face-to-face classes. Then I discovered e-learning, and I discovered e-learning before e-learning had really turned into an established thing. But I had known of a university that had a campus where I grew up. It was Southern New Hampshire University. And they had always had a distance education program before the internet, where they had programs for people in the military and people in rural areas. So that was sort of distance education correspondence, really. And then when the internet came around and Blackboard came around, they were absolutely the first in there. They were leaders in there. And now the university has massive programs, very interesting. And I've worked for them for many years. But when they first hired me, they sent me a DVD to learn how to use Blackboard, and I built my first class, and I started teaching it, and I was like, this is cool. But really, instructors were really part of the solving of the problems, of figuring out what works, but over time, e-learning became a subject. It became codified. There are standard best practices, and everybody caught up. And now there's sort of standard structures in terms of how courses get built and administered. And so I was in higher education e-learning for a long time, facilitating classes, building programs, building curriculum, and this whole thing. But it was always within the higher ed format. And I worked for tons of different universities, trade schools, community colleges, a lot of different schools, mostly in America, but also Australian and some other places. Paris, I've built some programs. Anyway, other places too. But a few years ago, it wasn't just one thing, but I started thinking I really want to get out of higher education, because it was becoming so, they were definitely squeezing the fun out of it by making, the structures were becoming very structured, and it definitely had limitations. And also at the same time, I think this was in 2013, there was a law that was passed where companies, it affected the contracts companies could give freelancers, because they were concerned that they were going to have to start paying health insurance I had all these ongoing contracts, all these plates spinning. And on January 1st, 2013, they all came in at half what they had been before, because everything needed to be under a certain limit, so that they wouldn't have to pay health insurance, even though they didn't have to anyway. It was just a misunderstanding of the laws, I think. But that was their response. And I just thought, this is too iffy. So I started a company with a friend of mine in Chicago called ElevPro, and our focus was on products that support career development and training. And so we worked with a German guy, another consultant who had part ownership of had some software. We developed learning games, training games. We worked on a lot of different topics and had various different kinds of clients, from not-for-profit to definitely for-profit. But we just sort of kept that whole thing going, and got more and more involved in Well, I sort of got more involved in the technology side of things. And eventually my business partner just didn't want to do it anymore. So I was like running the whole show. And then I ended up finding this full-time job. And I thought it was close enough to what I was looking for. So I've had this a full-time job for a year and a half. And I haven't shuttered our company, but I have sort of turned all the knobs down on it. And I have to say, the thing that took the most amount of time, that I was scrambling all the time, was for sales, doing sales. And I don't do any of that for a full-time job. And it's like being on a holiday.
Yeah, it can take, I mean, sales takes a lot out of you. You can, I know that for sure with my product development business, I can spend all my time on sales. And so it's tough.
Yeah.
You at some point you have to do the work. Yeah. You have to, when you finally get sales, it's like, oh, cool. What do I do? No, I actually have to do the work. And that's,
right.
It really would. I definitely, that resonates with me, because it would feel like I'm on a holiday if all I was doing was like, the business was just pouring in and I didn't have to worry about any outreach or marketing or anything. And I was just focusing on the design work. At the same time, I got to say, there's some fun in the marketing, and sales is kind of fun. Like I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer. I do product development, and that's fun, but I wouldn't want to do it all the time. So there is kind of, I struggle with that, because there is kind of a balance that's
it's a challenge.
Strike.
It's a challenge, but then when challenge is accepted, you're able to make those sales. But then, like you said, it's almost like when you're an entrepreneur and then you have your own business, right? You have to figure out a way to systemize and automate things, and to a certain extent actually reach out for help, right? Find somebody that can help you out. Find somebody that can be that salesman. And if you're the one that is the salesman, I mean, you got to be front and center. But typically when you're the leader of the show, it's like you can find somebody that can help you, or at least get enough, especially if you're going to scale, you have to eventually, it has to be more than a one-man show, right? In my digital marketing agency, I saw that. I was trying to do everything. I was trying to do the sales. I was trying to do this. I was trying to create the websites, do the social media, set up their Google ads. And I got so bombarded with like just a few clients, and I'm like, what am I thinking? Like, I can't do this alone. And so getting that virtual team has been a help. Getting a virtual assistant has been a huge burden off my back, where it's like, now I can just wake up in the morning and be like, okay, well, where's the stuff the do outs, right? Like now I'm just worrying about posting it or having it put on my website, because there are certain things I don't want to hand over, and certain things I like to touch. But it's like, at the end of the day, like, we have to stay in our genius, right? And if we can stay in our genius and have somebody else do the stuff that, even though we might be good at it, but we don't need to be doing it, it's like, you can get bogged down, sure, and it can definitely slow your momentum. And then at the end of the day, if you get too many clients at once, you're like, you line up, you sell to 10 people, but you have started no work on any of it, and you're like, oh, I mean, these due dates are coming up quick, so let me start now, right?
Feels good for like a day when you get that sale, and you're like, all right, I don't have to do anything today, so I can just soak it in, and then the next day you're like, all right, I got to do something here. So, but Hannah, that's really cool that you still have the business, so it's still operational. Is that something that you would maybe, pick back up at some point and run with it? Or
I thought about that. I thought about how things are going to move in different, I have different scenarios moving forward, and it just really depends on the amount of effort I put into each of my swim lanes or my channels or my spinning plates, whatever I want to call them. But possibly, currently my setup is really nice and I like it, and I'm learning a lot from my job. And I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs, if I'm learning and I'm engaged and I'm sort of moving forward if I'm moving forward like that, then it's good. But if it got boring, or where I felt like I wasn't contributing on a valuable level, I would disengage. And I would want some other challenge. But it could be on some level I open up shop again. Probably Yeah, it would be a slightly different business. It would be slightly different products, slightly different angle of what we were selling. But we were definitely developing products without even thinking about product development as a thing. And now I am a product developer. So it's like, yeah, that's what I've been doing this for years.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's
I love
really
that picture though of the spinning plates. Like I can just imagine in my head, like the talented individuals that are actually spinning it on the thing, and then they're like, oh, add another plate to it. I mean, that's seriously how you feel sometimes, right? It's like, man, I hope these things don't all come crashing down on me or embarrass me in front of everybody I'm performing for. It's one of those things. And I'm sure
some days
a musician feels the same way,
Sometimes some days they all come crashing down too.
That's true. That's true.
It's
you just got to pick the pieces
happens.
back up.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So Hannah, I mean, this is a great conversation, and through your entrepreneurial journey and in your journey as a musician and everything you've been through, because you've had your hands, I mean, just in this short amount of time, I'm amazed at the amount of things that you've done, things that you've had your hand in and accomplished. But from the highs to the lows, what has been the most difficult thing about your journey or about being an entrepreneur and a musician?
Yeah. That's a good question. There's probably more than one answer. I think the one thing that comes up on a daily basis is not having enough time to do what I really want to do or energy. I mean, so even sometimes you don't know, at the end of the day, you've got a little block of time, but you're exhausted. So I try to do my own thing first in the morning because I'm a morning person. So I try to wake up and I have coffee and meditate. I've got a routine, and for me, like having routines is really important. So I'm not stumbling around.
Right.
So I know exactly where I am. But I spend time. I write every morning. I'm writing a book right now. So
very cool.
I just set aside a little bit amount of time to work on that, and I think. But the question was, what's been hard? So time issue. It's not time management. It's just time. The time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but I think another thing that was like really hard looking back is that in the Chicago years when I was doing music, I didn't really have a mentor I was in the dark, and I think things are I think things are easier now in a way, because in those days you either had a record contract or you didn't, or you were part of a movement, or you weren't, I don't know. But now there's just much more information out there, and there's a lot more different paths towards success, and you get to decide much more clearly for yourself what success looks like for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's unique for everybody.
Yeah, and success is not always money, right? I mean, it's how you view things, and if money is one of those things, it's great. We all want to have money. We all want to be financial free. But again, money's it's not the route to happiness. I mean, there's been plenty of people taking their life that have been rich, and you're looking at them like from the outside, you're like, I would love to have your money, but it's not about that. So success can be graded on so many levels. And it's really comes down to me is like, am I enjoying life? Am I enjoying what I'm doing every day? Am I enjoying the hustle? Am I enjoying what am I doing right now? This thing, my routine. Is that freeing me up to actually be successful and to actually go around not blindly, but actually making sure I'm stay on my path? And I just think, again, success is putting one foot in front of the other for an entrepreneur and just keep moving. I mean, at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that is exactly like not quitting is success. Not quitting is like being yourself on a daily basis. I'm doing my thing, and I've got my thing going, and I'm good at my thing, and I'm gonna do another thing, and I don't even know what that it's gonna look like. But it's like being yourself. It's a way to be yourself. I think I've read a study over and over again that money is like you need up to like that people get happier with money up to something like $80,000. So if you're like $60,000, then you're in 70, you are a little bit happier. Up to 80,000, a little bit happier. Maybe that figure has changed now. Maybe it's $90,000, whatever. But there's a limit to it. And then after that point, more money isn't the factor that brings happiness.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean that's very cool. Well, Hannah, I feel like we could talk to you for hours today, and it's been great to talk with you. And I feel like there's a lot to learn about what you're working on, what you've done. So, but as we wrap up the episode, what's one piece of advice you think you could give to our audience to help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. Can I give more than one?
Oh, for sure.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
I would just say that the key thing is to have a little bit of heart in the thing that you want to do. It shouldn't be just because you read somewhere that it's a good idea to make a lot of money. You can do this thing. It's a little bit of not scam, but it's a little bit of a hustle. I think that there should be a little piece of yourself in it. It shouldn't be just a good idea. That it should be something that really, that you really believe in, or that you love, right?
Mm-hmm. And you can put your stamp on that you're actually contributing to, instead of just repackaging and selling it. Yeah.
Although repackaging and reselling stuff, that level of business, that puts food on the table. I mean,
sure.
That's absolutely. But if you're in a situation where you really can do something creative, something new, something fresh, and something that you love, that's a luxury, and you're a lucky person. And because you're a lucky person, you should not stop. That would be my second piece of advice. Every day, get up and do it again.
It's a very, very cool perspective. Yeah. And just not stopping is, that's got to be one of the top keys to success, is just not stopping. Of course, there's certain businesses, certain things that, it makes sense. Like you reach a point where you're like, okay, this isn't working out, and you have to know when to stop it. But at the same time, there's so many things, I think, where it's very easy to just, reach a point where you see that there can be some success, but it's so challenging that it's very difficult not to stop. And then you stop and you'll never know, you could have been right there, right before some real success happens. So I think that's got to be a real key. And then you can wake up after a few years, after having taken some lumps and gone through all these challenges, and you might wake up and say, man, I'm so glad I didn't stop, because if I had, I wouldn't be here right now. And thank God I didn't. I kept going, and I kept working on this thing because people see value in it, and not, besides the money too, right? You can have with a business, with any entrepreneurial venture, and with music, you have the opportunity to touch people's lives and really affect them. So it's almost, if it's working at all, it's almost like your duty not to stop, to keep giving people value as much as you can.
I think one final thing also is about challenge. Challenges will come no matter what you're doing, whether you're taking the easy road or the harder road. There will be challenges both ways. Mm-hmm. And when confronted with a challenge, I think it's really important to break it up into micro challenges. Break it up, divide it, and just, chip away at things. Allow yourself more time than you think it's going to take, and just do the small bits that turn into the big bits.
I love it. Yeah. That's great. Well, Hannah and guys, that's a wrap for the episode. From the both of us, Hannah, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value to what we're doing on our podcast. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Hannah is working on, check out her website at hannahjudson.com. That's HANNAHJUDSON.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, guys, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends, like we do always, to include all of our listeners, our followers, and our subscribers. If you find value in our show, please consider making a small donation to show your support. Even just a few dollars helps us keep things moving and brings value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.